Ignite to Impact, a weekly podcast that explores what it takes to make your community, our nation, and the world a better place. You've tuned in to be inspired and enlightened as we pull back the curtain and dive into intimate and energetic conversations with achievers and doers. We are talking with leaders who are in the trenches making phenomenal changes through business, nonprofits, education, and the arts. Our goal? To encourage, motivate, and challenge you to the next level in leadership. Now, here's your host, Master Leadership Strategist, Dr. Geneva Williams.
Hello there. This is Dr. Geneva, and welcome to Ignite to Impact, where we have conversations about making the world a better place. Each week, bringing inspiring stories from people who come from all walks of life: entrepreneurs, teachers, nonprofit executives, artists, everyday folks, unleashing their leadership, solving problems in their community, creating change and leaving impact, fighting hunger, finding ways to end homelessness, helping children learn to read, and working to eliminate poverty, dealing with education, race relations, transportation, crime. Yes, we travel around the country and we learn what real leaders do day to day, how they ignite collaboration, turn bad situations around, and still stay excited about their own journey in leadership. And we'll discover how these leaders build legacy to create everlasting impact. Now, I believe leadership comes in many forms and shapes. I believe it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or where you live. Everyone has the ability to lead. Leadership is about influencing others to do something, and everyone is called to lead in some way, sometime in life. And so here on Ignite to Impact, we bring you those leaders who are change agents, making things better than they found them. And guess what? I have one of those incredible individuals who has found a way for many years to make life better than she found it. Carol Goss, who was a 2014 fellow in the Advanced Leadership Initiative program at Harvard University. And I start off with that because I really believe that Harvard and the professors there and the folk who went to the program were enlightened and inspired by her. So I want to start there. Before she went to Harvard, she served as president and CEO of the Skillman Foundation, an independent foundation whose mission is to improve the lives of children in metropolitan Detroit. And they do that by strengthening schools and neighborhoods. And then she's now working in an exciting project, an initiative to improve the lives of our most vulnerable women and children through a project called Warrior Women Against Poverty. And so we're going to talk about that, but I want you to know a little bit more about Carol Goss and her leadership challenges and journey and everything that makes her what she is. She's served as program director at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. She was named the 2007 James A. Joseph Lecturer. She's been cited by Crain's Detroit Business as one of Southeastern Michigan's most influential women. She's had 20 years experience in child welfare, family services, and youth development in Detroit and Oakland, California. And while she's a native Detroiter, she's been all around the country and folk know her everywhere. She's won the Idealist in Action Award and Olivet College's Leadership and Individual Social Responsibility. The Detroit News named Carol Michigander of the Year. And in 2009, Great Grantmakers for Children, Youth, and Family honored her with the prestigious Fred Rogers Leadership Award. And she was also cited as the Eleanor Jositis Unsung Hero recipient just numerous accolades by people all across the country who know her as we do, a leader's leader. Welcome, Carol, to the show.
Thank you so much, Geneva. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Well, it's great having you here. And you look fabulous, and you look rested. And is that because you're retired?
I believe it is. And I also believe that it's because you do what's so important to you, what you're passionate about and what you love, and it makes me feel good. Mm-hmm. So I feel good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell us about Carol Goss as a young girl. We want to start there. We got to start there, work our way into your journey.
Yeah, okay. I grew up in Detroit. The middle child of 5 children. I grew up on the West Side. And my parents were hardworking parents that were very strict. And we were a very spiritual and religious family. And I've said this before many times, that my mom was the original nosy neighbor. She was everywhere, taking care of everybody. And today we might see her as a community organizer. She brought people together around special issues. And so I learned watching her the meaning of caring for others. And, I started that early in my career, active in my church. In high school, I was active in the Y-Teens and those kind of service clubs that were always giving back. And my life, I had this mission that I wanted to go to Africa to serve. And I thought about that in high school. I always knew I wanted to be a social worker, and I wanted to go to Africa. And so, I graduated from Chadsey High School and in Detroit Public Schools, went to the University of Michigan. Life changes, and I didn't get to Africa, but I did become a social worker.
Why did you always know you wanted to be a social worker?
I believe it's the whole spirit of supporting others, the compassion that I always felt for those who didn't have the benefit of having what I have. We were definitely not rich. In fact, I think today we would be described as a working class family, a family where 2 parents worked to take care of their children. My parents, we never had a babysitter. My mother worked midnights in the hospital, and my father worked days. And so someone always took care of us. So I always felt that there needed to, we needed to share what we had. And we always did that. So social work seemed to be the profession that would fulfill that need in me to help others, to give back. And when I went to graduate school, I learned that there were lots of ways to be a social worker. So there's ways to be charitable, but there's also ways to help build leadership and to organize others and to help young people to reach their goals. And so I think I just found my niche in that and spent the first 20 years of my career working in what I believe is one of the most difficult areas of social work, and that is child welfare.
Okay.
And I actually loved it.
Why do you think it's so hard? Is it because you're actually seeing young, vulnerable children and recognizing sometimes the horror of their situations? Or is it can I change it? The concern, not being able to change everything and everyone. What makes that child welfare so difficult to work in?
So I think it's what you said, in that it is very hard when you see children, young children, particularly ages 1 to 5, which is the largest percentage of children in the child welfare system are between that are in that age range.
So young babies.
So
young
very
kids.
young children. Yeah. You see that the abuse and the neglect that they experience. But I think more than anything, what bothered me the most was that those systems that are designed to protect and care for these children don't do their job. They don't provide the support to families so that they can be better parents. And they don't, I think we learned this easily, they don't remove children soon enough. That in some cases, and sometimes they remove children too soon. And so child welfare to me is a system that we've been trying to reform for many, many years to make it a better system of caring for children. And it still remains the same. It's one of the hardest systems to change. And there's been lots of innovation and hopefully lots of things that are happening now will end up providing the support to those families. But it doesn't change in the way that it needs to, so that the majority of children can have a happy life.
And so it seems from your career that you've approached child welfare and the situations and issues of families and neighborhoods from the varied directions that you mentioned are possible in social work, because you've had what's called the direct service, actual working in programs, seeing children and families, and then you've also had the systems, the opportunity to work on systems.
Right.
And then you've had the opportunity to influence what happens by making strategic financial investments in philanthropy.
Exactly.
How do you view all those opportunities to make a change? What leadership is required to make those kinds of changes?
So, that's a really wonderful question, because it really is all connected. And so first of all, I think what you learn first is that you can be an enabler to families, or you can truly be a person that helps them to find their way to a better life. And it takes some skill and time to do that. And as a young social worker, I had to learn that, because I wanted to make their lives better. I wanted them to change. I wanted them to have adequate food and clothing, and I wanted them to have a job and a good house. And so you end up trying to do everything for them before you realize that they have to do some of this for themselves. And so you learn that. And then you learn that the community has a significant role to play in the success of families. So when I was raising my children, the community that we lived in had everything that families and systems needed for you to be successful. So here's an example. So the schools were connected to the library. So the library had the books for the kids that went to that school. And then the drugstore had the school supplies that the kids needed. And then the families had strong relationships with each other in the school, so that they were watching your children navigate going back and forth to school, making sure that everybody was safe.
Yes.
So you think about, okay, so this community had all of these things there so that children could be safe, secure, happy, and could reach their highest potential. So when I went to work at a foundation, what I realized is that part of my role was to first get resources to those who did not have access to resources. And lots of times those were grassroots organizations. They were individual leaders already doing really good work in communities, but didn't have the financial support that maybe others did. And maybe not even the connection to things we were learning about, best practices, and what really helps families to grow and children to grow. So my job was to bring that together, to bring those that were learning and doing, because of evaluation and other things, what really works well, together with those who had the passion and the leadership on the ground. Now, to do that meant you had to take a lot of risks.
Yes.
And leaders have to take a risk. You have to step out there because everybody doesn't want you to support grassroots organizations. They may not even see the value in that. They may not want to collaborate and be that kind of partner. But you have to be willing to say, if we really are going to help, if we really are going to make a difference in the lives of children and their families, we have to do it this way, and we have to do it together. So I think one of the best experiences I had, well, I want to just share two, if I could.
Yes.
So one was a family foundation that I worked with and for in California. There were 4 Mr. Stewarts, that was our board. And they often would say things like, during the board meeting, I don't think these people, and they'd say it just like that, I don't think these people can get better. I don't think that community is the right community. And of course,
what did you do, Carol? What'd you say, Carol?
I was not.
How did you handle it?
I was not insulted. I just realized that they just didn't know. So it became my mission to take them everywhere. I took them on site visits. I took them out in the neighborhoods. I took them to foster care homes because they had this thought that, well, foster care families, they're just in this for the money. I said, well, I want you to meet some foster care families. I want you to understand what they're doing. By the time I left there 5 years later, they were the ones that were saying that, well, you know, we have to go out there and meet them, and we have to give them the resources so they can do the work. But leadership means not becoming upset with them.
Yes.
But taking on the responsibility for helping them.
Yes.
Helping them to see what's possible.
Yes.
So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was my experience when I came to Skillman.
Okay.
And what I knew is that the Skillman Foundation had been making lots of wonderful grants to lots of organizations that were making a difference. But the majority of children were not benefiting from those grants because where those organizations were working, the majority of children didn't live. They lived in other places. And they lived in places that had few, if any, resources for children. And so we had to take our work to where children lived in their families. And we had to make sure that they felt that they could be a partner in all of this. And again, it was the same thing. To convince the board, you had to take them out there too. You had to take them to the community. And in doing that, I think everybody learned. Yes. I think the residents in the neighborhoods learned. the philanthropic community learned. And I think we all learned that there were ways to do this, to help what we called natural leaders, those folks on the ground every day, kind of like what my mother did when in her life, that those people just needed enough support so they could make a difference.
And so you saw a whole bunch of nosy neighbors.
That's right.
That really
in my
were
mind,
right. That's right. Who were the
That's
forerunners
exactly
of these community organizers, the whole opportunity to do that, and you gave them a little help.
That's right.
Yeah, that must be very rewarding. So tell me about Harvard. When we talk about rewarding, so after your phenomenal career, you went to Harvard, and like I said in the intro, I know Harvard learned, I believe Harvard learned more from you. I'm sure they did. But this led to Warrior Women. So we want to hear about Harvard and Warrior Women.
It did lead to Warrior Women. So I went to Harvard in 2014 on this fellowship. And we were the 5th cohort of the Advanced Leadership Initiative. And there were 38 fellows from around the world. And we had a seminar every week on leadership and social justice. So we had a case study that we took apart and discussed it thoroughly, and then we were allowed to audit 2 to 3 classes across the university. So I took 2 classes in the law school with Charles Ogletree because he was talking about things that also related to people that live in poor communities. So one was revitalizing cities, and the other was a class based on The Wire. If you remember that TV series, I think it was an HBO series on The Wire, that was pretty devastating. And we had a whole class on that. So I have to say, I did learn a lot. But I also, because the majority of the fellows in our class were from the for-profit sector. They had been CEOs and of companies. They'd been lawyers and accountants. And they also had some thoughts about whether or not people were deserving of the kinds of support that we were talking about. So I did spend a lot of time raising issues and questions.
Yes.
And I'll give you one example. So in the Revitalizing Cities class, they looked at cities across the country. And they kept coming back to Detroit because in 2014, we were just coming out of this devastating recession. There'd been a foreclosure crisis. There'd been a jobs and employment crisis. And we had lots of abandoned houses and lots of abandoned land in our cities. And really, we were going into bankruptcy. So it was so interesting in that class. Every time they talked about Detroit, they showed this picture of this house on the east side that was not surrounded by vacant land and totally no windows, just an abandoned, broke down house. And they'd show that picture and they'd say, and this is Detroit. So, I just could not.
Right.
I could not let that be.
Right.
And so I was always raising issues. First of all, saying, do you really believe that everybody in Detroit lives in a house like that? And then the second thing is that think about that there are people who have lost resources, have lost their housing. They really have experienced a lot of horrific things. but just think about those that are still there, that are working,
Yes.
that are helping, that are making sure that things are better. I said, is it perfect? No, but there are people that are still working on that. So at the end of our fellowship, I brought those fellows to Detroit.
Okay.
We all came, all 38 of us. We met with the mayor. At that time, Mayor Duggan had just been elected. We met with him. We had a panel of leaders. We had a great time. And then when I completed that fellowship, I knew I wanted to do something that would change the lives of our most vulnerable families and children. I thought I wanted to start with children, but then it occurred to me that we ought to do 2 generations, that we ought to start with parents and children.
Okay.
And that was the genesis of Warrior Women Against Poverty.
So tell us, what is Warrior Woman Against Poverty? And I knew I had started the segment off talking about, I knew you brought more change to Harvard than it did. See, I knew that. See, I knew a story would end up like that. So that's a beautiful thing. So Warrior Women Against Poverty, what is it?
So Warrior Women Against Poverty is a movement of African American women that are pledged and passionate about helping our most vulnerable families and children. It's a volunteer effort. The women are all volunteers. There are 45 of us, really. And our mission is to help these women with a support network that they do not have. We do it by mentoring, by resource development, by advocacy, by helping them to move towards self-sufficiency in their lives. And at our very first meeting, I asked the women to take out their wallets. And I said, you just had a flat tire on the freeway. Look in your wallet. What would you take out that would help you with that flat tire? So they took out road service cards and credit cards, their cell phones to call someone. They had all kinds of resources. And I said, okay, so think about these women who are homeless. They have a flat tire. What do you think they would have? And who do you think they could call to come help them? And it started this conversation among us around the lack of resources and the lack of a support network that they could, even if they didn't have money, if they didn't have a credit card, they didn't have anybody they could call. So Warrior Women has become that social support network for these women. We partner with COTS.
And COTS is the Coalition
on Temporary Shelter. And their model of working with the homeless today is family only. So they've moved from their previous model where they served everybody to just serving families. And the executive, the CEO, Cheryl P. Johnson, says they made that decision intentionally when they begin to see children, adults who came back to them who had been children in their shelter. And they would come in and say, don't you remember me? I was here with my mom. And now here they were with their children. So we partner with them. They identify women who are working in their Passport to Self-Sufficiency program. These are women and children, and the women have decided that they want to work on goals, they want to get a job, they want stable housing, they want a better education. They want better for themselves and their children.
Mm-hmm.
So we work with those women to help them reach their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we have to recognize is that poverty is different today.
And how is that?
There is a whole culture
Mm-hmm.
Of poverty, and there are books that have been written about this, in that today people are growing up in an environment where they don't believe that they can live differently.
Mm-hmm.
See, if I grew up at a time where people saw education as the way out of poverty.
Yes.
So
Okay.
if you worked hard,
Mm-hmm.
if you got good grades in
Right.
school, you could get a good job.
That's right.
And you could really work your way out of
Right.
poverty.
And
You
be
would-
anything you want to be.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
These families do not see themselves there. So we now work with 20 women.
Mm-hmm.
They're making marvelous progress. There are some 3 that are in community college now.
Oh,
They've
beautiful.
gotten their
Mm-hmm.
high school diploma or GED, and they've gone to community college. We have 4 that have started their own businesses. One is an artist and a photographer. One is a chef and a caterer.
Mm-hmm.
One makes jewelry. And so they are making progress. So now, is it easy? No. This is probably some of the hardest work I've ever done, because their lives are often crises driven.
Mm-hmm.
So it only takes something small. Their boyfriend gets out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
Your child gets in trouble in school. Your car breaks down.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Just those little things
Those
that
little
can
things.
turn.
It can turn their whole
around.
lives upside down.
So, Carol, tell me. So you know, again, a long leadership career that you've had, and just given so much to the community, and have seen community issues dealing with children and families from all perspectives, and have worked in all perspectives. And now, as a volunteer, you and 45 other women are giving of your time, your talents, and your treasure, because I know there's some money involved that you're contributing to this.
Yes.
Why you do it?
Oh my God. You know, I just think, why not?
Mm-hmm.
It is my, so much has been given to me. And it's not so much an obligation, it's a requirement that I have to give back. And I talk to lots of people, to young people, to people that are starting grassroots organizations. I share my time with them. But these women, to talk to them, this is what's going to make our world better. To spend time helping them to become stronger, happier, to really find their place in the world. It's a requirement, because somebody helped me. A lot of somebodies helped me. And that's really why I do it.
It's a beautiful thing, and I'm so glad you're out there doing it, and keep on doing it. We love you.
Thank you.
We appreciate and respect you for all the work that you've done in the past, but particularly what you're doing now, because this is that soul work. I mean, that's
Yes.
gut-wrenching.
It is.
In there.
It is.
Challenging. But you're doing it. You and the other women who are truly warrior women. And I assume the warrior women are both you and the women that you help.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
Because I'm going to tell you, there's a war going on there, a war against children. And these women are fighting a good battle.
So together,
yes,
warrior women. Thank you so much, Carol, for being with us
me.
and sharing how you ignite to impact.
Thank you so much, Geneva.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Ignite to Impact. Your host is Dr. Geneva Williams, an award-winning executive, facilitator, and master leadership strategist. Dr. Geneva is dedicated to inspiring others to get their leadership on and equipping the next generation with leadership tools and tips to help make the world a better place. Sign up to download Dr. Geneva's mini ebook on leadership. Get the show notes, links, and other resources at drgenevaspeaks.com. That's drgenevaspeaks.com. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast to those in your community via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Google+, and leave us a 5-star review in iTunes. When you do that, it helps others find the podcast easier. Send your questions or comments to info@drgenevaspeaks.com.